Hi, this weekend I was very excited to see another film in the Saw series. Possibly my favorite horror movie series. I think the Halloween films have much higher peaks, but have far deeper troughs, whereas the Saw movies are generally extremely consistent, having an interesting moral quandary at the center of it, exciting levels of gore, a degree of creativity in terms of the structure of the storytelling, and the horrific machines in which Jigsaw's victims find themselves trapped, having to choose between horrible death or living with mutilation as a way of compensating for their crimes against society. In this film, set between the first two, we have Jigsaw, John Kramer, the engineer who kidnaps people and puts them in his malicious traps, dying of cancer. There is seemingly no hope until he hears from the member of a support group that a new experimental treatment is available in Mexico. He gives them his life savings, goes for the treatment, and it seems to go well, and he establishes a new lease on life. He goes to thank the people who helped him and discovers that they've cleared out. They were con artists, and he is the very last person they should have crossed. It's much more of a character drama than previous films, and really almost most of the first half is geared towards the story of John, and that he is a man with his own sense of morality, his own sense of right and wrong, and how the scales of justice ought to be balanced, but also struggling with this notion of running out of time, that his work as he sees it is unfinished, and he just needs more time to complete it. He's kind and polite to those he passes, but also fantasizes about viciously punishing those who do something as simple as steal a watch from a comatose patient. Sucking their eyes out, for example, seems to be an appropriate punishment for them, apparently. As the film goes on, then the various characters are trapped in a series of brutal games, subjected to horrifying tortures, and everything part of a huge overarching game orchestrated by John. I really enjoyed it. It's not often that the 10th film in a series can be described as possibly the best, and I think this might well be the best. It has an intricacy to the storytelling, to the characterization that is genuinely compelling, just beyond the surface levels you would expect from a horror movie sequel. This is a genuinely really good film. Kevin Greutert returns from one of the previous films to direct, having been an editor since the start of the series. Tobin Bell, I thought, as John, was exceptional. It's a character that is not particularly demonstrative, very enclosed, and filled with this bubbling sense of rage and anger against the world, partly because of his illness, partly because of his own experience that previous sequels have elaborated on. Um, but it's a genuinely engaging thrill ride. Some very clever plotting, some twists and turns that I wasn't expecting, a greater sense of moral outrage that's justified, I think, in this case, rather than some of the previous victims simply being day to day bad people rather than those horrifically scamming the terminally ill. And as John says, stealing from them the one thing they have left to give, hope. It's obviously not for everyone. It's very violent, it's very brutal, it's very graphic. But if you can stomach that sort of thing, I think you'll find this to be quite an unusual movie. It's much more intricate and complex in dramatic and emotional terms, I think, than one might expect, even from compared to the other Saw movies, which are generally much more sophisticated in terms of storytelling and have a bad rap just because of the amount of gore and violence they contain. I think there's a certain snobbery that people assume these are bad movies. Actually, they're generally pretty good. The weak ones are usually weak, not because of the level of violence, but because of the poor quality of the writing and the storytelling. But even as a film in its own right, and I think you can probably pick up a lot of cues from elsewhere in the story about the previous parts of the narrative, I enjoyed Saw 10 or Saw X a great deal, and I'd recommend it wholeheartedly.